Good evening, you lot. How you all doing? Well, it might be morning for you, or whatever it is for you. I hope you're well and dandy. Now, I've only had this for a short amount of time, 3 or 4 weeks, and I've already had loads of comments asking questions. Can I make videos on several different things? But we're going to start with the engine, and we're going to start with what do you do if it won't start? What do you do if it won't start? Well, luckily for you, I grew up with these engines. Long before Nitro, I was playing around with these engines. When I was just a kid, got my first Nitro car when I was 8, so I was playing around with these engines well before then. And I've been buying and selling them, repairing them, you know, doing all sorts with them ever since. They're just a strimmer engine, basically is all they are. Little 2-stroke engine. So very, very simple. If you thought Nitro engines were simple, these are even more simple. So, what do you do? Well, I'm going to do a separate video on every single thing. The choke, the tuning, the carburetor, the spark plug, the ignition, the fuel inside of things, the pull start. I'll do a separate video on everything, and the exhaust, because these have an expansion chamber. All 2-strokes need one, but some manufacturers don't include them, and that can cause a problem. And also they can get blocked up. But we'll start off with the spark plug, I think, on this particular video. So to get to this particular spark plug, it's underneath here, and in order to get to that, on this is a Roving Q Shorty. In order to get to that, you need to take off, there's one screw there, and the same on the other side, and then you need to take off the petrol cap. Now I must point out that the procedures for checking spark and checking the spark plug, making sure it's working, and cleaning it are the same on every engine, but we're talking specifically about RC cars. So if you've got any petrol, RC car, it'll be the same procedure. Yeah, you could have a low C5T, you could have a different Roving, you could have any of the other brands out there. As long as it's got a petrol engine in it and a 2-stroke one, even if it is 4-stroke, it'll still be the same procedure, 4-stroke and 2-stroke. This procedure will be for that. The only thing is you might have to take a different method to get to the plug. Some of them you don't even have to do nothing because they're accessible. So you take off the petrol cap, just pull that out like that. You've undone the screws. That will come off of there like that. And it might be a good idea. I don't normally do things like this, so I normally leave it off. But put the cap back on. That way you won't get any dirt inside your petrol tank. I know some of you are quite finicky about that kind of stuff. Now you can get to the spark plug. Now this is very, very simple to do. Literally, that's the boot. That's what takes the electric from the coil all the way up round into your plug. Just pull it like that and it will come off. If you've got a brand new car, or at least you've never taken the plug out before, that might be quite stiff on there, because in the factory they do like to jam things on a bit too tight, and also you might find the plug itself might be a bit tight in there. In the factory they probably do them up with air ratchets or air tools, or maybe they just graunch on them a bit tight. They're always a bit tight, the spark plugs. Saying that, normally when you buy one of these, it'll come with one of these, a very cheap rubbishy screwdriver slash spanner slash spark plug spanner. You can use this, there's no reason why you can't use it. In fact, I'm going to use it now just to demonstrate. But if you haven't got one of them, or the plug is too tight and you can't get it off with these, because these are notorious for rounding off the little the nuts, on the plugs. They'll round them off in no time, but to be honest, these will probably round off before the plug does. But if you haven't got one of them, normally on these small engines, it's a 10mm socket. It's a 10mm plug. Normally, it might not be on yours. You'll have to check. But this is a plug socket, but you can get just any long reach 10mm socket that will go on there, and a ratchet, or you can get a ring spanner. If you can get a ring spanner in there, you better get a ring spanner in that gap there, and you'll better undo it. So you don't need one of these, but this is what they normally give you, and they do work. You just got to put it on there like that, and they undo. See, look, this is a good demonstration. just about come undone. I was about to give up because I felt like it was going to round. To be honest, if I was you, I'd chuck that in the bin. If you've got a brand new car and they give you this, put it in the bin. It's no good. Go and get yourself a good socket and a ratchet if you haven't already got one, and that'll do the job a lot better. So once you've undone it, all you've got to do is unscrew it like so, and then you'll be presented with your plug. This one, see, I like to run my engines quite rich. I always do, quite a lot of oil. So this one is quite black. Now you can clean that. So I'm just going to go and stick you on the tripod, and I'll show you how to clean it, and then we'll check the gap. And then once we've done that, we'll check to see if it's got spark. Although, actually, you want to see if it's got any spark first, because we're assuming that your engine won't start. So actually, let's do it the right way. Let's check to make sure we've got spark, and then we'll see whether we've got the correct gap or not. Right, so let's test it for spark first. So what you need to do is zoom out a little bit. On these engines here, what you need somewhere metal. You need a piece of the engine in order to ground the plug to see if it's going to spark. Because what you need to do is you need to create a connection. So you put the plug in the end of the boot there. See, there's no metal around, is there? And the only piece of metal is down in this hole. You could go to the kerfuffle of taking off all the plastic engine casing, but you don't want to be doing that, do you? You might be out in a field somewhere. So get yourself a screwdriver, something like that, and don't stick it down in the piston hole, but stick it sort of just so it's touching the top of the head. You want to stick it in there like that, just so it's touching the top of the head, but it's not in the hole. Okay, that's quite important. But make sure it's touching the head. Doesn't matter what the rest of it's touching, but if you've got a metal ended driver like this one, don't touch the end of it while you're pulling on the pull start, because you might get a bit of a shock. But what you have to do, put the plug so that it's touching the screwdriver like that. You can see that, can't you? Make sure that your kill switch is on the on position, the run position. Luckily on these ones, they're just a press button. But if you've got a switch or a remote kill, make sure that it's turned on for run. And then just pull on the pull start. Can you see the spark there? You can see the spark on the plug there quite clearly. So we know we've got a good spark. Pull start doesn't go all the way in anymore. There you go, now it's gone in. So we know we have got a spark, which is good. If you haven't got a spark, then it would indicate that the plug is probably not a lot of cop. The first thing that you would do, if you haven't got any spark, is clean the plug, get yourself a wire brush and your plug, just give it a bit of a clean off like that. There you go. And then once you've done that, get yourself a rag, bit of paper, use your t-shirt, anything you want to use. Just give it a wipe off. Make sure there's nothing stuck down in the electrode, and that's a lot cleaner than it was. And I dropped it, so it's probably not going to work anymore. Yeah, they are quite delicate. If you drop them, they tend not to work. Now, the gap is between the electrode, which is the little thing that you see poking out, the little bit that you see poking out. It's between the electrode and the top there. Now the gap, there's no specification in the instructions, but I normally run these small engines at 0.55 of a mil. I used to run in thou, but I don't know. I haven't got a set of feeler gauges with thou anymore. Feeler gauges look like this. These ones are specifically for measuring valve clearances, but you can use any type. I use these for everything. Valves, plugs, anything that needs to be measured. 0.55 of a mil should just slide in there. I don't know what the spec is. If you're particularly worried and fussed, then look up to see what the spec is for your engine. Oh, dropped dead again. Look up and see what the spec is for your engine if you're particularly worried, and then just set it to that spec. Just going to check to make sure we've still got spark. We have, because I did drop that plug on the floor, you see. Once you've cleaned it, all you've got to do, stick it back in that hole. It does up to the right and undoes to the left. Clockwise is to do up and clockwise to undo. The same as any other ordinary thread. Now you don't want to crack it up nice and tight. You just want to nip it. Just nip it. Just go like that. Just go. There you go. That's tight enough. That's nipped. That's tight enough. Put the boot back on. There you go. You've checked and cleaned your spark plug. Now there's not a lot else you can do now. If you don't get a spark at all, so you put your plug there, you've managed to find some other piece of metal, perhaps you can get to the head on your one. If you've got one of those fancy expensive engines where there's no plastic case, or maybe you've just taken the plastic case off of yours, or it just doesn't have one, or you can get to the exhaust, anywhere there's metal on the engine you can ground it to. Now if you've done all that and you just can't get a spark, I'm going to do a separate video on points and condensers and coils and all that kind of stuff. So I'm not going to go into it in this video. There will be another video on that coming out soon. But if you do all that and you just can't get a spark, the very first thing you should do before you start digging into points and stuff is try another plug. Now the plug doesn't have to be, I forgot to mention, I should have mentioned it when I had the plug out. The plug for this particular one is MR7H, as you can see down there, MR7H, and it's an NGK plug. The brand doesn't matter, the number does matter if you're going to run it, but if you just want to test spark, you can stuff any old spark plug in there, any size, any make. It could be for a car, it could be for a motorbike, it doesn't matter. It will go in there. You might have to take the top off. Some of them have different tops. You just unscrew them and they come off. And then you can see whether you've got spark, because obviously if you get spark on the other plug, you know that your one is no good and you've got to go and buy another one, and then you just got to find one with the same number. Different brands have different numbers, but if you go down to the shop and you ask the person in the shop, I want this plug, they might say, well, we've got an alternative in a different brand, it's the same heat, it'll be fine. That's what you need to do. But there you go. So it's very easy. They're a lot like glow plugs. If some of you lot are coming from nitro, just think of the spark plug like the glow plug. You need the correct one for the engine, but you can test it with any plug. Very easy to do, very simple. But yeah, if you put the new plug and you still haven't got a spark, you're going to have an issue either with the points, perhaps they're dirty, the coil might be bad, the condenser, or your switch, your on and off switch might be stuck in. You need to have a look at that, get a bit of switch cleaner on it, bit of lubrication, lube it up a bit, try and get it to unstick. But you'll have an ignition problem somewhere. But the first thing you always start with is the plug. Make sure that the plug is sparking and you work your way down. Don't fanny around with points and stuff before you get to the plug, because the plug could be the culprit and it's the easiest and first thing to get to. So there we go. Having said that as well, if your engine is running erratically and is cutting in and out, hasn't got much power, it might be running a bit dicky, the plug can cause that. It might be sparking, you might test it and it might spark. That doesn't mean that it's a good plug. So if you tested it and it has got spark, but you just can't get the engine to run how you think it should, or how it used to, or anything like that, if it's a bit rough, cuts on and off, whatever, just try a new plug in it and it might fix the problem. 99% of the time it will do. So I hope that helps some of you lot, and there'll be many more videos on these little engines to come, because these are so simple you would not believe. One more thing before I go, which I think is probably worth mentioning. It's very unlikely that you'd get any of this happening, but in the event that you can't turn off your engine, all you've got to do is pull the cap off. Without that connected, the engine won't run. It will not run. So if your engine's running away, perhaps it's stuck up against a tree, the whole car is, and it's blasting away and you can't turn it off, your remote kill switch won't work, that one won't work because the wires come off or something, and you're thinking, oh no, how do I stop it? Well, you can do two things. You can pull the fuel line off, like that, because it ain't going to run without any fuel. There's no oil in these engines, so it won't run on its own oil, and petrol engine won't run on its own oil anyway. That's only diesel engines. So you pull the fuel line off, or simply, if you can get to the plug, I mean on this one you wouldn't be able to get to it because there's that cover what goes on there, and there's four bolts holding it on, so it's going to be blasting away at full throttle. Even if the throttle's closed, you could jam it closed or something. But if you can get to the plug, I know some of you lot, or some people have these engines, the fancy ones, with no covers on, no nothing, and the plug's right on top there and you can just pull it off. So just pull it off. Be careful you don't get a shock, because there's a couple of 100,000 volts going through there. But you'll be fine. You can just pull that off, no problem at all. But it's very unlikely you're going to get a runaway of that description. Your kill switch will probably work most times, or you can just push the throttle shut. But in some cases it might happen, in which case you can just simply do that and there's no problem there at all. Because there will be some people, I dare say some of you lot are going to be going on about pre-ignition and all of this stuff, and actually a petrol engine can run without a spark plug. Well, if listen to you lot, if your engine gets that hot, then it's going to be running by itself without spark. There's a serious problem, and there's going to be some damage done. It's just very, very unlikely that an engine will keep running, a petrol engine will keep running for any length of time with no ignition. It's extremely unlikely. But if it does, there's more things you can do. Loosen the plug, get rid of the compression, cover the air filter, take the fuel away. There's loads of stuff. I know some of you are going to have some smart ass answers for it, but trust me, just take the plug cap off and it'll stop. I'll see you later on. All the best.